Right. Welcome, welcome. I'm hoping that I'm in full view. I'm not seeing myself in full view, but we have a few people here live with us today. And I am Diana Lockett. For those of you that I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet. I am Canada's only realignment coach. I'm an author. I am a conscious communication leadership consultant. I am a spiritual mentor. I wear lots of different hats. And today I'm coming to you with the hat that combines my conscious communication leadership consulting and my spiritual mentoring hat, coaching hat. And I'm taking a lot of my content from my newly released book, The Call to Freedom, Heal Your Pain, Awaken Your Loving Presence. I just got my author copies yesterday. So most of you got the book way before I did. Go figure. Some of you know the tragedy that surrounded the book. And so normally as an author, I would have gotten a pre-copy to go through, but I actually didn't get that as part of my experience because my beautiful friend and book designer tragically perished in a fire 2 weeks before launch. And so everything was a scramble at the end, met with like a really tender heart space. So I thank you for your patience. If you got a book that potentially you come across any errors in it, particularly in formatting, let me know and I will send you a replacement book, okay? Because some of the first maybe 5 or 10 that went out may have had some formatting errors. Today, we are talking about the imposter syndrome, and imposter syndrome is the condition where one feels like they're not enough. They're not skillful enough. They're not experienced enough. Everybody else in the room has more skills than they do. And it typically leads to this experience of being super anxious and not having a lot of internal success. I came across this topic for 2 reasons. Number one is I had a Facebook memory yesterday shared with me where in 2019, I did like a 1-hour live stream on Facebook all about this topic. And I listened to it. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience of listening to yourself, years later. It's like, that was really good. I don't know where that came from, but that was really good. I'm really impressed. And so that was one of the motivations I had. And then the other one was some experiences that I've had recently with leaders in the personal development field and how they may not be showing up as the most integral parts of who they are. And it's impacting their business, it's impacting their clients, it's impacting their relationship with their team. And so I want to unpack the imposter syndrome. I want to talk a little bit about it. And I'm also going to talk about the gift of the imposter syndrome, because there always is a gift in every experience that we have in our life. There's a gift. Now, this is what I would call more of a spiritual lens. And sometimes it's hard to put that lens on. It's easier to put our glasses on that keep us in a place of either victimhood or unknowing. But when we put our spiritual glasses on, we get to see that there's a gift in every experience that we have. So the imposter syndrome, let's talk about it for a moment, is that experience of feeling like you are a phony, that you're fake, that you're going to be called out. And so whatever it is that you're performing in that moment that you're having to present or perform or show up for is going to be met with a sense of tension. Now, we know through the science, this is where I love to blend science and spirituality. Through the science, we know that when we have tension running through our system, it's going to make it really hard for us to access our genius and open the portal to our deepest capacity to communicate and to relate. And so we have this experience that we call the imposter syndrome. It creates tension. The tension then diminishes our capacity to communicate and to relate, which then reinforces the, see, I told you so, I'm no good at this stuff. And it becomes this self-defeating pattern. Now, we all go through this sometimes. So I want to just normalize it for one. No matter how experienced or confident the person looks like when they're on stage, when they're in that meeting, whatever they're doing, no matter how confident they appear, everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody has those moments. And let's just reframe it now and let's call it moments of humility. Moments of, oh my goodness, I want to really show up the best that I can. And am I going to do that today? Am I ready for this? Have I prepared for this? One of the things that I often tell my students and clients is planning is priceless. Write this down. Planning is priceless. Plans are useless. Planning is priceless. Plans are useless. And that means that we have to do the work. We have to show up. if we want to do our best. But then when we get in front of the camera, when we get into that meeting, when we get into that difficult conversation with our kids, our parents, our partners, we don't want to have notes in front of us and reading off the notes. I mean, I've got notes on my other computer down here. I'll glance down occasionally because I created a plan for this class, but we don't necessarily want to be reading it. And this is what happened to me when I was a youthful 24-year-old just a few years ago. Ha, ha, ha. I was a speech language pathologist, brand new graduate, placed in an environment where I became pretty well within a year a leader in my field. And I didn't think I knew what I was doing. Somebody obviously thought they knew what I was doing, but I didn't believe it. And I was placed in an environment where I was presenting to big groups of people, like sometimes up to 100. And there were ministry personnel, board level personnel, teachers, other speech pathologists, colleagues, which was my biggest fear because my colleagues know a whole lot more than I do. They must. And so I would go into those meetings. I would be presenting, standing at a podium, and this is how I would talk with my paper in front of me. And it's because I didn't have the confidence to share what I really knew. So planning is priceless. Plans are useless. We have to do the work, and then we have to trust. We don't have to, but we get to trust. So with the imposter syndrome, no matter what the person has accomplished in their life, they don't feel like they are enough. It's rooted in a deep inner child experience of information that was fed to you at some point in your life. And it was defined, I think it was maybe around the 70s or 80s, the imposter syndrome was defined, and it was defined particularly in relation to women, which I'm not sure how I feel about. It's a whole conversation, another conversation. But now we know that men admit to having imposter syndrome as well. And it is an inadequacy in the environment, despite your capacity to be objectively competent in what you're doing. So I knew what I was doing as a 24-year-old speech language pathologist. I had graduated top of my class. I had gotten my choice job. I was already working in the field. And yet I didn't feel that I had the capacity to, or the competency to be able to show up. And so what happens is it creates a feeling of, I don't deserve to be there, which, let's put it in different terms, I don't belong there. Let's follow that breadcrumb, I don't belong, period. And it starts to impact everything that we do in all of our relationships. And what happens is it's rooted in the sense of shame. Not enough is rooted in a sense of shame. And if anybody has read my book, you know that my story came with a lot of shame. And my story came with a lot of not enoughs. I mean, as a kid, if I said the wrong thing at dinner or put my elbows on the table, I was told to go kneel in the corner, facing the corner. That was massively shameful. Massively shameful. So of course, at 24 years of age, I'm carrying that shame into my experience. It doesn't matter what my skill level, education level, capacity level is. I didn't believe it myself. And what it is, it's a misalignment with my perspective, or with the truth of the perspective that doesn't allow me to share my gifts, to be able to celebrate my gifts and who I am, and to be able to step into, with alignment, that alignment piece is really important, into my longing for my future. So when we're running the imposter syndrome, it's really hard to commit to the future because we're pretty well stuck in the past. So it's a cognitive distortion. It's a faulty or inaccurate thinking about who you are, and a disproportionate belief about who you are in relation to other people. So you doubt your accomplishments, you doubt your skills, you doubt your history, and you doubt your track record. You don't actually celebrate the things that you've done really great in the world or in your life. When I released my book, I did tons of interviews, and every interviewer says, how does it feel to have released your book now? And I know the response they want to hear is, oh my gosh, it's so incredible, such a relief, I'm so excited. But that wasn't my experience. It was complicated. That's the only word that I could come up with. It was complicated because I was running grief, because it had been a 7-year writing experience. And I had this sense of, literally the minute it launched, the sense of now what? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Like, what's next? So I didn't give myself that time to really sit in the celebration because of the complication of it. In a different launch at a different time, and I have launched other books, I have celebrated, but this one, not so much. Now, I am taking a trip in 10 days and I'm going to the Caribbean for 10 days. So I will be celebrating. I will probably have a mimosa most mornings and a glass of champagne most nights. And I'm going to dance and I'm going to have a really good time. And I'm going to sit on the beach a lot and just rest because I deserve that. I need the rest. So when we have any circumstances in the past that allowed us to feel like we were not part of the group, if anyone has been in an experience where they didn't feel like they fit in, economically, culturally, socially, they didn't fit in. Maybe there was bullying at school. Maybe you didn't feel like you fit in with your family. Those are all experiences where we feel excluded from the group. Maybe you spoke a different language. Maybe you were in a different religion, had a different religious culture that you participated with. That can help to fuel the imposter syndrome. It also gets fueled by our family environments. And I had that experience. I didn't actually write about that in my book. Let me know if you can relate to it. You can write like just chat anytime I say something that you can relate to. My experience growing up was if I came home with an A on my report card, it was always, why wasn't it an A+? Of course, that fueled my imposter syndrome and my not good enough and not being enough. So this growing up where there was so much of an emphasis on overachievement and this difficulty feeling like I belonged in a particular group. I didn't have friends because I was the English girl in a French elementary school. I was always the outsider. Didn't write about that either. Book number 2 is coming to mind right now. And so left unchecked, it creates a lot of negative mindset beliefs, which is that cognitive dissonance, that my perspective doesn't necessarily match the reality. And some characteristics of the imposter syndrome could be self-doubt, undervaluing my contribution. So that's like, my book launched and I didn't celebrate the worth of this little tiny book, which is, when I heard it was almost 200 pages, I was thinking it was going to be a whole lot bigger than this. And I look at it, it's like, that's it, right? There's that undervaluing this achievement. Attributing success to external factors. So yeah, people said, well done on the book. And I might say something like, it took me seven years. Of course, it's going to be decent because I took this much time. Or, I'm just really lucky that I have a community of people that want to read this book. Or I'm lucky that I went #1 bestseller in 4 categories. So I attribute my success to chance. That's all part of the imposter syndrome. Sabotaging self-success, so reinforcing the feelings of inadequacy. It's sabotaging my self-success might be, well, Lewis Howe just launched his book, and of course he's going to be New York Times bestseller. He has 1.5 million followers, and I don't. That's a sabotaging of self-success. Setting unrealistic expectations is part of our imposter syndrome. So setting unrealistic expectations, like, there was one error in the whole book. In fact, there was one spelling error in the whole book. And the unrealistic expectation is I cannot publish a book with a spelling error. But you know what? I did publish it with a spelling error and about 17 other errors. I had to, because my book designer wasn't here to help me. And launch day came and we did the best we could. And I could say it wasn't good enough, but it had to be good enough because it was what it was. I could not argue with reality. Some of you may know that there's a formula in my book that says pain times resistance equals suffering. Pain times resistance equals suffering. The resistance is fighting against the reality, fighting against what is. And on a spiritual journey, should we accept the invitation, we have an invitation to lean into what is with acceptance and compassion and patience and tolerance and self-forgiveness and all those things. And then, of course, we show up and we create the changes that we want in our lives. But pain times resistance equals suffering. And the alternative formula is pain times loving presence equals freedom, hence the call to freedom. Other characteristics of the imposter syndrome is continuous fear of not living up to expectations. And the other one is burnout, is very common in the imposter syndrome, because this sense of it's truly a sense of lack of worth leads one to push so hard that they burn out. Okay. And what happens is that pushing hard makes, let's call it the work, if you're pushing on work, makes the work a chore. And one of the core parts of how we can live a life that is, the word I'm looking for, meaningful, a meaningful life, is feeling a sense of contribution. And when we're pushing and it's a chore and we're just going up and going up and going against, we forget that everything we do has an opportunity to contribute, and that gets to create meaning in our life. And if we're not doing that, then what are we doing? Why are we here? So this imposter syndrome is like this negative, messy roommate that's constantly saying, see, look at that, your clothes is on the floor again. Look at that, the dishes are dirty in the sink again. Come on, shape up, do better. And with that kind of negativity, it's really hard to do better. In fact, what happens is we often slip back into either defeat, not wanting to show up, giving up on the work that we're doing, and it continues to feed our lack of self-worth, and we fail to access our self-realization, which is truly our contribution to the world. It doesn't matter what it is. And in today's world, and I'm going to say especially in the field of personal development, because that's the world that I'm in, there's a lot of people who swing the door outwards. Brendan Bashar talked about this like maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I heard about this. They swing the door outwards and they look outward for their fulfillment. They look outward for their self-worth. They look outward for their self-realization. And we know, and even people in personal development that do that, they know that the door needs to swing inwards. But people get so caught up in the likes, the shiny, the admiration, that, everybody that's bowing to them, and they forget to turn inwards. It becomes really difficult. So that can lead to further insecurity, because if you're getting acknowledged for your accomplishments, like I did as a little girl, getting A's, not A pluses. And if I got A's, by the way, I was paid for my grades. So if I was motivated to get A's because I'd get more money. And if I got an A plus, I'd get more money. And if I didn't, somehow I was a bad girl. Somehow I failed. So it leads to more shame, more guilt, more insecurity. And as someone who is in the personal development field, and if that becomes your motivator, how many people like you, how many people purchase your product, how many people admire you, then that further feeds the shame, the guilt, and the insecurity. And that door swinging outwards continuously. And that little girl or little boy, but I'm going to say little girl because most people on this in this group are women. That little girl is a scared little girl screaming for attention. And I'm going to say we all do it sometimes. The difference is, how quickly can you catch yourself? How quickly can you correct? And how quickly can you start to create change? So the gift in the imposter syndrome, because everything in life has a gift. The gift is we get to recognize that we have been running this misunderstanding. In Sanskrit, the ancient yoga language, because I'm also a yoga teacher trainer, we call it avidya. Avidya is this misunderstanding. Its meaning literally means ignorance, but I'm not saying you're ignorant. I'm just saying you don't recognize it. You don't know different. Misconceptions, misunderstandings, and incorrect knowledge. So the gift of the imposter syndrome is we get to see, oh, that feeling that I'm having when I have to do something, it's telling me something. It's communicating something to me. It's a wake-up call, if you want, that's telling me that something is not in alignment. And then I'm running a misunderstanding, and that's creating the misalignment. Does this make sense? Okay. So if we don't recognize that, what happens is we pathologize the imposter syndrome and we make it wrong. And we make ourselves wrong. And then everybody who seems to be doing it right, we look up to, we admire, we bow to, and it makes us more wrong. And next thing we know, we're wearing a cloak or a veil. I call it cloaks or veils of unworthiness. And so the gift is to notice that, to notice when we are stuck in the misunderstanding, wearing the cloak of unworthiness or the veil of unworthiness. And then the gift is knowing that when you recognize that it's a big misunderstanding of who you are, when you notice it, you can start to create change. Coming back to my book, you know that the research shows that there's a 1 in 400 billion chance, and it depends on what research you read, that you would be here today. So each one of you hear this, please. You are a miracle. Statistically, the odds of you being here are 0. And I once heard someone say, the odds of you being here are like, take the Pacific Ocean and choose a target many, many miles away, and then try to send a pebble to that target. It's impossible. That's how impossible it is that any one of you would be here, and you're here, you made the cut, and it's not a variation of you, it's you as you are today. So you are nothing short of a miracle. So the gift of the imposter syndrome is when you recognize it, you get to then make something different about your understanding about yourself. You get to remember that you are a miracle. And if you're a miracle, I know I said this in the book too, everybody else is too. Even the people that are sitting in jail, having done inconceivable, incomprehensible things to other people, they have simply forgotten that they are a miracle. So if you know that you are a miracle, because you're going to hear me say it over and over in every one of these masterclasses, that's how we're going to start all of them. That's how we start to create change, is that recognition. We get to change the misunderstanding. We get to lean into something different. So we're no longer resisting the pain, creating suffering, but instead we're bringing this loving presence and awareness of being a miracle. My dog barks every day at 4:30. No idea why. So you're going to hear him, and that's okay, because I don't have to be perfect. Okay. So the inner work that we get to do is the inner work of recognizing what are the masks that we're wearing and how can we remove them so that we can reveal our golden essence, which is the golden Buddha story that's in my book in chapter 1. You might have read that, I think again, it was in chapter 1, that my sister attempted a suicide when I was 11. And my parents were away at a wedding. And this is pre-cell phone days. They just happened to call. I found my sister. I found the suicide note. She was unconscious. I shook her. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. But there was so much shame built into the narrative of my family that I knew I could not call 911 because that would reveal that there was something wrong in our family. And I was hiding our family's secrets. So my parents called, and I told them what happened, and they said, it's okay, we're going to come home. And I just had this massive, I can remember my 11-year-old shoulders just dropping, the relief that they're coming, they're going to take care of it, and it's all going to be okay. And they came home and they told my sister, go wash your face, brush your hair, put on a dress, you're coming back to the wedding with us. And it was never spoken again. And so that day was, I could like so remember the mask that I had to put on that day. And that mask is part of what contributed to my imposter syndrome. And the way that I have dedicated my life to taking off my adult life, since I've known different, to taking off my mask is to show up authentically. And that means sometimes my dog, who I am blessed to have, you're right, Becca, is going to bark when I'm doing live calls at home. It's when I get animated with my voice, he gets really excited. And so that's just the way life is. So here's the strategies, you can write these down, to navigate the imposter syndrome. Number 1, you have to realize it. Awareness. If you're not aware that you're running it, you're not aware, you can't make change. So awareness is the first step. It's like, oh, wow, look at that. I'm in this fear space again. I'm comparing myself to that other person who maybe's been doing this longer. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they just have a better PR agent. Maybe they just have a shinier picture. Maybe they just have a better talk. We never know what anybody else is running behind the scenes. we tend to over idealize people who seem to have it all together. And I'm going to tell you, because I know a lot of these people, they don't have it any more together than any of us do. They are simply better at projecting. I'm going to pause for just a second and have a little chat with my puppy. All right, so our chat didn't go as well as I thought it would. I wanted him to lie down, but he's sitting next to me, so he usually is a little quieter. So remember that anybody who's projecting something into the world, it is often a projection. And it doesn't mean that they're better than you, that they're more successful than you. Maybe their bank accounts are bigger, maybe they're not. Right? Maybe their pictures are brighter, maybe they're not. Maybe they have a bigger audience, maybe they just like to say they have a bigger audience. Maybe they do and maybe they don't. Just remember that, okay? That doesn't make them any better than you. As long as you idealize them and you don't realize that, guess what? They're a miracle just like you. No more, no power over, no less, no power under. That becomes a really important criteria to the awareness piece. So become conscious of it. How do you practice consciousness? You practice consciousness. You set up practices throughout the day. What does it mean to be conscious? My practices are every morning. I do meditation. I do movement check-in, body check-ins, and then I do movement. I do that before I check the news. I do that before I have conversations. I do that before I check my work, because that's my self-care practice that I need for my nervous system. I'm going to give you a little tip here. Your cortisol levels are fairly high in the morning. They're not the highest, because if you have stress throughout the day, they could be higher, but they're high in the morning because that's what lets your body wake up. Melatonin at night, if you create the right circumstances for sleep, like no computers, turning down the lights, winding down your conversations, melatonin gets stimulated in your body. It helps you sleep. But in the morning, serotonin helps you wake up. So your stress levels, cortisol is your stress level, is already elevated, as well as adrenaline. So if you watch the news, if you check your emails, if you get right to work, you are now saying, okay, here's my baseline for my cortisol and adrenaline levels for today, and I'm keeping it there. And we're starting there, and then we're adding through the day. We're adding on to our stress through the day. The research shows that when you do that and watch the news at 8 in the morning, specifically, they were looking at people watching the news, and specifically negative news, which pretty well it all is. By 4 in the afternoon, people were measured to still have higher levels of stress in their body and higher levels of negativity in their mindset than people who did not watch the news. And we're talking about 2 to 5 minutes of news. We're not talking about like on repeat. Imagine what that does, right? These newsreels that just go over and over. So practices every day that allow you to step into your conscious awareness, make it part of your daily commitment. You know, people say, I don't have time to meditate. My answer is the same. You need to meditate twice as much. You have time. You have as much time in the day as the rest of us do. The difference is, how do you prioritize your time? Number 2 is be present. So first, it's awareness. Number 2, be present. Get out of your head and into your body. So those of you who've been around for a while and have practiced with me the realignment practice that I have, if we have time at the end, I'll take you through it. The realignment practice is an embodiment meditation. It's a practice where you get to go in, first of all, remember your miracle, and then secondly, track your body. What are the sensations in the body? Sensations is the language of the body, and it's your body communicating with you in every moment that you pay attention. And then part of it is to love what comes up, because we often will love, I came out of yoga today, my heart feels so spacious, my body feels so stretched out, I feel so strong and relaxed. And then something happens and I contract, and I don't like that. Can you love it all? Remember, pain times resistance equals suffering, because it's simply your body giving you feedback. And speaking of feedback, there is no failure, there's simply feedback, always in life. Number 3 is your realignment, is your presence realignment practice. Number 2. Number 3 is keep failure in perspective. Again, if you've read my book, you know how much failure I've had in my life. especially financial failure. And yet I don't let it define me. I am not defined by the circumstances that happened in my life. I'm not defined by my abuse. I'm not defined by my neglect. I'm not defined by my financial failure. They are simply experiences that I had that gave me feedback about how I want to show up in the world today. My very first book, my power quote was, it was Ignite Female Changemakers. Our experiences do not define us. Our experiences refine us and have the potential to catapult us to our deepest purpose. Now, other people have taken that quote and shifted it around, and I'm super happy. The greatest gift that you can hear as somebody who writes is somebody else, or speaks, somebody else quoting you. It's a beautiful privilege. And so keep your failure in perspective. If you stumble on your words, let me tell you guys a very real example. I was in LA recently at the Best You Expo speaking on stage. I am so used to speaking virtually. That was my first live event with a microphone in 5 years. So most of my events were small enough. In 2017, I was on a couple of stages, 500, 1,000 people. I had a microphone. I did okay. I did okay in those circumstances. Then I started hosting my own events, and my events were smaller. So I didn't need a microphone. I was in a smaller space. Then COVID hit, we went virtual. And I was used to speaking really calmly and quietly in a virtual environment using my regular voice. Well, I got on this stage at the Best You, and anybody who watched the video or who was there, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Because I got off the stage and I had a microphone, and people throughout the rest of the next couple of hours said, "Oh, that was you speaking on stage. We heard you," across the event, like expo site, which was a big conference center. And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." And now I know why they heard me, because I finally got my replay of the talks that I did. And I'm yelling in the microphone because I forget that I'm holding a microphone and there's people in front of me, sometimes up to 30, 40, 50, 60 feet away. And I want to make sure they hear me. So I'm yelling at people. That is not my best moment as a speaker. And I have to just remember that's feedback. Remember, when I'm holding a mic, I can talk really quietly and create greater impact than yelling at people like this, which is really what I did. I had to laugh at myself, right? So remember that failure is simply feedback. Number 4, what other people think about you is none of your business. For somebody who grew up in a home where, when there was an attempted suicide, parents came to get the little girl, said, "Get all dressed up," took her back to the wedding and never talked about it. I didn't grow up with that imprint. Okay, sometimes I have to remind myself, especially when I hear people that either judge me, criticize me, say things, it stings for a moment, and I have to remind myself what other people think about me is none of my business. And let's put an "and" on there. And I use it as information and say, where are they right? Because I'm committed to personal growth. This is understanding that you are me lovingly disguised as you. People are my mirror. And where are they right is the question that I need to ask myself if I want to be committed to my personal and spiritual growth. Doesn't mean that they're always going to be right, but I have to be willing to ask the question. I hope that makes sense and you can understand and discern the difference. Asking the question saying where are they right allows you to step into your spiritual maturity. Taking the time to sit in it, to absorb it, to reflect, and then say, you know what? No, I really did the best. That's their projection. That's using your discernment. Okay. Release comparisons. I talked about this earlier. You never know what someone is going through behind closed doors. The person that you think is the shiny object. One of my coaches from Amsterdam, he's just a hilarious guy. He's so vibrant and energetic and such a great communicator in the work that he does. He does embodiment work. And he went to a men's retreat in LA a few years ago. And right from there, he came and did an event with me in Toronto. And all the men had to reflect what they saw in the other persons. So they were in a circle, and all the men would reflect what they saw, what they saw in a person. And everybody said that what they saw in him was a shiny pamphlet. They called him the shiny pamphlet. Do you guys know what I mean by the shiny pamphlet? So it's the person who's all sparkles and shiny and smiley. And even when they're having a meltdown, they're doing it with a smile on their face because they know it's so good. It's good to do that. And they have really good PR, and they have really good branding, and they have really good graphics. That's the shiny pamphlet. So he was known as the shiny pamphlet, and he owned it. It's like, okay, what part of me is a shiny pamphlet? At first he resisted it. And then it's like, what part of me is the shiny pamphlet? What is that informing me about myself? Do I like that part of me? Is it a shadow that I don't like? Is there a projection or a denial? And so it just becomes inner awareness, inner work. So I know that this same teacher who was called a shiny pamphlet 6 months earlier almost lost his retreat center, his $2 million retreat center, because they could not come up with the funding. And the people that had the funding, that had given them the funding for it, literally with no notice asked for the entire loan to be repaid, or they were taken back the retreat. And there was some clause that allowed them to. So they saw him as the shiny pamphlet, but I know behind the scenes there was a lot of stress. You guys know people like that too. You think it all looks good, but behind the scenes there's stress. The difference is, for me, I put it all in writing, so you know what's true and what's authentic. But other people are really good at masking it. So let go of the comparisons, because they're probably not any better, any more successful, any wealthier, any more aware than you are. The other thing is, I just mentioned authenticity. Stay in your authenticity. Stay in your truth. When you start to try to change who you are to replicate another, you are in the imposter syndrome. I'm going to say this a few times. Who you are is a miracle. There has never been and will never be another you. You're a one of a kind. So your job is to be beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay? I cannot be you. I will never be you. I never want to try to be you, because I can't do you as well as you can do you. So when you look at someone else and you try to replicate them, you can replicate their processes. Like, one of the ways that I made my book go #1 bestseller in 4 categories in 24 hours is I studied Lewis Howell, who was just about to release his book. I studied his book launch and I took notes. I don't want to be Lewis Howell, but I replicated his book launch journey. And now I'm teaching that, launching a course mid-May, teaching others the exact process and strategies that I used. So I did study, but I'm not trying to be Lewis. I'm being me, using Lewis's strategies and techniques. Okay, a little bit of a difference there. So be you, be authentic, celebrate who you are, be in your heart, be in your body, be in your mind, and remember that you are here for your unique purpose. Okay, my message is not Lewis's message. My message is kind of Becca's message, but not quite, because I've read your book, parts of your book, not the whole thing yet. So we have our own unique message and heart imprint that we're meant to leave as an imprint on this earth and in others' hearts. Be you. There's nobody else that can be you, and you cannot be anybody else. The other thing is mindset. I talked about negativity, nervous system, stress. When you're watching the news, create the practices that allow your mindset to be healthy. And it's not just negativity in your mindset, but it's things like worrying. It's, I always say to people, change your worry to wonder. If you catch yourself, and let me tell you, people use that word all the time. I'm worried my kid's not going to be, I'm worried my kid's late. I hope everything's okay. I'm worried I haven't heard from you in a few days. I'm worried, am I going to be able to pay the loan back on time, or the rent on time, or whatever it is? Am I going to get my book launched on time? Worry is part of our vocabulary in a culture that is rooted in stress. Change your worry to wonder. Whatever your question is, make it a wonder. I wonder if my kid's going to get home in time for dinner. I wonder if the loan's going to come through. I wonder if I'm going to get the book launched on time. So language is super important. The other word that I tell people all the time to eliminate from their vocabulary is the word just. That is an imposter syndrome word, and it does not serve you. It minimizes you. It's just me. Oh, I just wanted to add one more thing. I just have a question. You're minimizing yourself. Take out the just. My mother-in-law used to call, my former mother-in-law used to call and say, "It's just me." And every time I would say to her, "It is you. And boy, I am so glad it's you. Own who you are. There's nothing just about you." Okay. So 2 words to eliminate today in your vocabulary: just and worry. You're going to catch yourself, but so write them down. Until you write them down and remember to see them and catch yourself, you will not be able to create the change. And you might hear other people now saying it all the time as well. And then, super important, practice gratitude. I don't put gratitude at the beginning of my practices. I put it after my meditation, my embodiment practice. Then I do gratitude, and then I do movement. Because I don't want gratitude to bypass what's happening in my body as a felt experience. I want to be able to feel it all, because I want to get used to feeling it all, because that's how we build resilience. And sometimes going right to gratitude is a spiritual bypass. So practice gratitude, have a gratitude journal. Every morning, my 3 words are thank you, thank you, thank you. And I welcome those, those words. They're so easy. It's so easy. And then at the end of the day, the research shows that if you keep a gratitude journal, and at the end of the day, you're going to focus on 3 or 5 things that you're grateful for, whether you write them down in your journal, in your phone, just think about them. The fact that you set the intention to focus on writing it at the end of the day is going to allow you to attract more things to be grateful for. Now, it's not that better things are happening in your life. It's that you're going to notice those things. That's from the beautiful science of our reticular activating system, which is the part of the brain that is so genius. It focuses on what we want to focus on. So it's basically part of the law of attraction. So gratitude, super, super important. So to summarize, when it comes to the imposter syndrome, remember that you, as much as everybody else in the entire universe, deserves to be here, to share your message, to be in the abundance that you are in your life. And if you don't feel abundant, look around and notice the air that you get to breathe. I just watched the movie where the Thai boys were, the 12 boys from Thailand that were in the cave for something like 18 days. There wasn't a lot of oxygen there to breathe. Look at the abundance of oxygen we have, the abundance in the room that you're in, the abundance of nature outside, the abundance of love in your life, right? Abundance isn't just financial, but if you start to focus on abundance and you make that part of your gratitude practice, you will start to see more abundance in your life instead of focusing on what you don't have. And then let me just look at my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to share with you. I had so much, but I think this really summarizes it. One of my favorite teachers and hopefully collaborators, I'm going to be doing some online programming for Humanities Stream, which was founded by Neil Donald Walsh. So I'm super excited about that. And Neil talks about how, if you don't know who he is, he's the author of Conversations with God, and there's 5 of those books. He talks about how we are all fingers, unique, individual, our unique fingerprints connected to one source. Okay? Don't try to be somebody else's fingerprint. Be your own unique fingerprint. And remember that we are connected to a source. And if somebody is doing something that you admire and that you are inspired by, let that be a motivator for how you want to be in the world, what would maybe be in alignment with you, and look at what you can do to align yourself to that rather than trying to be that person. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. You can put them in the chat. You can unmute yourself. Becca, how do you feel you need to shift your 40-year journaling practice?
I love my mornings because I have that energy, and that's when I do all my things. So yes. I don't do anything at the end of the day. I've never even thought about it. But lately I've been waking up between 4 and 5, in the morning, and my alarm isn't set till 6, and it's
Mhm.
really bothering me. So there must, and like anxious could be. So there must be some things that I should be doing at the end of the night to shift my perspective to have more peaceful sleep.
So here's my first little tip. Take out the should, something I should be doing, and instead something that I want to do instead.
Stop
Should is
shooting myself.
stop shitting all over yourself. It's just a conditioning, the conditioning. So there's something that you're longing for to feel more relaxed in your body. Do you have my realignment practice? Do you have an audio copy of it?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
No.
I don't think we're going to go into it today, but if you go to my website, I think it's still there as a pop-up, as a gift. If not, message me and I'll send it. And if anybody wants it, I'll send you. You know what? I'll just put the link in the Facebook group for the realigned practice. It's an embodiment practice that if you wake up in the morning, you can put it on, listen to it. It's like 7 or 8 minutes, and it helps you to befriend all parts of you. And then you start to separate, because it's a parts practice. It's not like, oh, I'm anxious. It's like, oh, I'm aware that my fingertips are cold. I'm aware that my mouth has excess saliva. I'm aware that my chest feels heavy. So you're starting to separate the parts of yourself, so you no longer identify with this label of anxiety. Okay, so that's really important, because it's really easy to get caught up in the labels. So doing the parts of you is really an important practice. And then the end of that practice takes you into 3 questions. And the one question is, what does your higher source, your God of your understanding, the universe, or the light of your heart want you to know right now? And what information, just let that information get downloaded. What are you grateful for is the second question. And the third question is, what do you need? What do you need right now? And
Interesting.
when I feel myself going in towards anxiety responses in my body, so I don't call it anxiety in my mind, it's more responses in my body, and my mind makes the label, oh, that's anxiety. Or my mind makes the label that I have a fear, and then my body has a physiological response, because it communicates in both ways, both directions. My practice, my medicine is always to do breath work. And the breath work can be as simple as, it could be like a fancy yoga breath work, or it could be simply taking deep inhales and vagus exhales. So that activates the vagus nerve, which deepens parasympathetic or calming nervous system response. So that's breath work is super important. If you take 10 breaths like that, the minute you're breathing, you're out of your mind and in your body. And your mind will always, always give you something to, let's use the word worry about. Your body will always show you what's real. What's real in this moment? Yeah, there's a little tightness. As soon as you acknowledge it, within 90 seconds, the research shows that sensation can start to shift.
I know that lack of sleep over 2 weeks has caused the migraine that I'm experiencing today.
Yeah.
So I love that, interrupting and getting into your body. Thank you.
Always getting into your body. That's the only way to get out of the mind. We can't really even quiet our mind. I've had people, I've been a meditation teacher for 20 some odd years, and people would say, I don't know how to meditate. I can't quiet my mind. What if meditation isn't about quieting your mind? What if meditation is actually skillfully observing your thoughts, and then skillfully slowing down your thoughts, and maybe skillfully then noticing the pause between the thoughts? Maybe that's mastery in meditation. Maybe you've been doing it right all along, but you get so caught up in the, oh my gosh, my thoughts. Well, as long as you're aware of your thoughts, you're aware that you're having thoughts, you are not in your thoughts. You are witnessing your thoughts, and that's skillful. So truly going into the body is one of the, what I feel the most fastest way for me out of my mind is to be in my body. You know, do something different. Tony Robbins always says you have to change your state. So somebody who's really depressed, doesn't feel motivation, until you change something, nothing changes till something changes. So that person, I wouldn't necessarily have them put on a really bouncy song and jump all over the place, because that's too big of a jump. But can you put on a soft song and just dance slowly? Start to move your body really slowly. Listen to the impulses of your body. We're always getting impulses. We just don't pay attention. Yeah, fantastic. And then the other thing I want to say before we wrap up in response to your question or to your comment, Becca, is my suggestion is that if we want to be aware and conscious spiritual humans, these practices need to be done throughout the day, not just in the morning, not just at night. But can you take moments in the day to pause? Like, I'm so grateful. I live, oh, it's pouring rain now, but I live in the mountains by the ocean. So I can go out at any time. And sometimes I can be like listening to a podcast, planning my talk, doing this, doing that. And then I stop, I literally stop and I look up at the majestic mountains and I say, oh yeah, here I am. Like, it's 10 seconds and it can change my state. It can change my neurophysiology so quickly. And I also want to acknowledge a lot of people are experiencing migraines right now. And there's a part of me that wants to say, I think there's something happening with the lunar energy, with the eclipse coming through, that's impacting people's nervous systems right now. And a lot of people are experiencing migraines. So, all right, guys, any more questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for being here. Our next one is in our next masterclass is, if you two want to hang on for just a second, our next masterclass, I think it's May 20th. I'll put it in the Facebook group because I don't have my calendar open now. And I'd love to get some engagement in the Facebook group. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what practices you do. Let me know what speaks to you. Let me know what you'd like to learn more about. I'm trying to follow some of the content in my book, but I'm also expanding on it in these master classes. So my hope is that I'm delivering some value, and my commitment is to do them for 6 months. So this is our second one, to do 4 more, see how it goes, see how people are appreciating it, and then you guys can let me know. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.